Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel where I react to everything you definitely don't want to miss out. Yes guys, today we are reacting to the falling of the World War II. This looks depressing, I guess. And guys, you definitely don't want to miss out. A video created by Neil Halloran. You guys should go check out his page and contribute to his channel because he did a very good job to this video and he did a very good illustration, guys. This video is something that you definitely don't want to miss out, so please click on that subscribe button and turn on notification post so that whenever I post you'll be among the first to see my video. So guys, without further ado, let's dive right into it.
The average lifespan of an American is 80 years, and an 80-year-old today was 10 when World War II ended, 4 when it began. A soldier who saw battle would have to be in his late 80s at least today.
Guys, this is the falling of the World War II, and I have heard it's not just a documentary, it's a wake-up call, like a data-driven reminder of just how much was lost. Literally, I have never watched this before, and I honestly don't know if I am ready for what is coming. So let's get right and watch what we are going to see right now.
Generals, political leaders, the decision makers of the war, few are still with us. And over the past few decades, we've seen authors and filmmakers rush to capture stories from survivors before this connection of memory is lost. This project is not about individual war stories, and it's not about survivors. We're going to tally up the tens of millions of people whose lives are cut short by the war, and see how these numbers stack up to other wars in history, including trends in recent conflicts. We'll be counting soldiers and civilians separately. Each of these figures represents 1,000 people who died.
Guys, the minimalist animation style is like watching something scared being presented. That's just the truth. It's just like watching something being scared being presented, and it looks interesting, right? So I think there are more for us to see right now. Let's dive right into it.
Civilians were of all walks of life, whereas military deaths were almost entirely men. The average age was about 23. In most battles, for every 1,000 soldiers killed, there are more than 1,000 who are injured. The word casualty can be confusing because in military speak, it often includes both deaths and injuries, and anything else that takes a soldier out of service. Here, we're just counting the deaths, and we'll begin with American soldiers. Over 400,000 died. Most of the deaths occurred in the European theater, fighting the Nazis. And about a quarter were in the Pacific, fighting the Japanese.
Guys, this is literally a lot of people going down, a lot of people dying for the sake of the country, like thousands of people dying. Let's get right into it.
When you put them on the timeline, you see that casualties were the heaviest at the end of the war. The war began on September 1st, 1939. But the US wasn't willing to join the fight until Pearl Harbor, 2 years in. The deaths increased drastically on D-Day, when the Allies invaded Normandy. One of the most tragic moments of the war was on D-Day at Omaha Beach, where 2,500 Americans fell. So about the same number of US soldiers died on this single beach landing as the entire 13 years of the recent war in Afghanistan. The bloodiest battle in the Pacific was Okinawa, which lasted 82 days, during which 12,500 Americans died.
82 days. And that's massive, guys. That look at that Soviet Union numbers. It's not even close to others. Like these aren't what this is annihilation, guys. This is it. This is it.
About 5,000 of these deaths were at sea from kamikaze attacks. Now let's look at some other countries, starting with Europe. Germany started World War II when it invaded Poland. Poland ultimately lost 200,000 soldiers in the war. Most died after the invasion while the country was occupied by Germany and the Soviet Union. Germany, meanwhile, lost just 16,000 in the invasion of Poland. The Nazis went on to invade and conquer other countries, including Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, Greece, and Yugoslavia. France surrendered, but after losing 92,000 soldiers in the Battle of France. Over 200,000 ultimately fell, which includes deaths in POW camps, French colonies, and other fighting. Yugoslavia suffered almost 500,000 military deaths. The initial invasion brought relatively few casualties on both sides, but the deaths mounted under Nazi occupation due to guerrilla fighting, civil conflict, and mass executions. The Nazi invasions were swift, with relatively few German losses. Even the Nazi commanders expressed surprise at their success. And then we have the United Kingdom and the United States, who were not invaded, but
Guys, I'm not going to lie. I grew up hearing about the US side. Yeah, I grew up hearing about mostly the US side, but this puts it into a completely different context. Like this video shows a different complete context, and when you see it this, you realize why America sees the World War II differently, and their losses was real. Like it was real. It's not fake loss. It's a real loss. But on a global scale, this is like a friction. I don't know, but guys, this is really shocking, and the story is like mind blowing at the same time. Not because of how interesting the story is at the moment, but the fact that they allow people to die. That's unbelievable. And I don't know why this whole war was not put to an end. Though even if it was put to an end, I mean why it wasn't put to an end earlier before it could lead to this massive deaths. Tell me what you think in the comment section, guys.
fight to the Nazis. Britain lost about the same number of soldiers as the US, which includes the British colonies. Germany lost about 500,000 soldiers fighting the US and Britain in what is known as the Western Front, which took place in France and Belgium. But most Nazi soldiers died in the Eastern Front, Germany's unsuccessful invasion of the Soviet Union. The numbers are staggering. The most famous battle of the Eastern Front, and perhaps the turning point of the European war, was Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army successfully took Stalingrad, but then got surrounded by the Soviets and cut off from food and ammunition. 500,000 Nazis would ultimately die in Stalingrad. Another 100,000 were taken prisoner, of which 6,000 would ever return. POWs had a low survival rate throughout World War II, and it was particularly grim in the East. When you include these POWs, roughly the same number of Germans died in Stalingrad as all the Western Front fighting against France, the UK, and the US. And though Stalingrad was a victory for the Soviets, they suffered almost twice as many losses as Germany. The Soviet Union would eventually defeat the once unstoppable German army, killing 2.3 million Nazi soldiers. But winning the war came at a cost.
This is a whole lot, guys. Wow.
8.7 million is the official tally by the Russian military, a hotly disputed number.
No, like the civilians, like look at Poland, look at China. This is a massacre, right? And the entire villages bombed, burned, and erased, like I mean eliminated from the surface of the earth. I think literally there were only few people left, and that was how they were able to even raise more people that are even existing in the world, or should I say they were hidden in the underground houses. Why these things were going on? Because I don't get like this set of people dying every single day. That means the people, the living souls left will be very, very little, or should I say, eventually there might not be any living soul left. Guys, let's get back into this video.
Some studies have calculated as many as 14 million dead. To complete the count of European military deaths, we need to add German deaths from other fronts, including the North and Africa, as well as deaths from other Axis powers allied with the Nazis, Hungary, Romania, and Italy. When you put these European military deaths on the timeline, it looks like this. You can now interact with the chart to learn more. Pause the narration if you would like more time. And now we switch to civilian deaths in Europe. Six million Jewish people were killed in the Holocaust. If you separate this by country, you see that about half, 2.7 million, were Polish. 700,000 were Soviets, followed by Hungary and 17 other countries. Broken down another way, about half of the 6 million were killed in the concentration camps.
Guys, 6 million Jews, like this was like an industrial model, should I say that? Because they built camp not to fight a war, but to erase people, like to eliminate people from the world. And this weren't just a war, like this is human failure on the global scale. This is based on my own idea. Please don't quote me wrong. Please. This is based on what I feel is the truth. That's just it. Anyways, guys, let's get right into this video.
Over 1 million died in Auschwitz. Most were killed in the gas chambers. Others died from starvation, exhaustion, disease, and other forms of execution. The second most deadly camp was Treblinka, which was exclusively an extermination camp, set up to look like a train station. Mobile killing groups killed 1.4 million Jews. Like with the gas chambers, men were killed first to reduce the risk of revolt. The Holocaust also includes non-Jewish deaths. Between 130,000 to 500,000 Roma, then called Gypsies, were killed. The numbers are disputed. About 250,000 people with disabilities were killed. Homosexuals, Catholics, and other groups were also exterminated, but their numbers were relatively small. Some historians say that other civilian deaths should go under the label of Holocaust. About 2 million non-Jewish Poles were killed under German occupation, some of which were sent to the gas chambers at Auschwitz. When you combine civilian and military deaths, over 16% of the total Polish population died in World War II, which is the highest percentage of any country. But not the highest in total death count. The Soviet Union again tops that list, losing at least as many civilians as it did soldiers, somewhere between 10 and 20 million. A particularly dark moment for the Soviet Union was the siege of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. German forces surrounded Leningrad before civilians could be evacuated. Supplies, including food, were cut off for 2.5 years. 1.5 million people died as a result, mostly from starvation, mostly civilians. Stalin's cruelty towards his own people is partly responsible for these numbers. He often didn't allow civilians to evacuate from cities, thinking it would cause the soldiers protecting them to fight harder. About 1 million Soviets died in Stalin's own labor camps, called the Gulag. Just about every country suffered civilian losses, especially countries who were invaded. While many died as a result of so-called collateral damage, the biggest numbers occurred when it was no accident. Civilians were exterminated, purposely fired upon or bombed, used as human shields, or intentionally deprived of food. The intentional killing of civilians was done by most warring parties, including the United Kingdom and the United States. The United Kingdom was spared of a land invasion, but still lost 60,000 civilians, largely from German air raids or blitzes, often directed at civilian population centers.
The fact that people were starved, derived of food. I know that World War One was already catastrophic, but World War Two is like the world completely went insane. The world completely went mad. That's what I'm just going to say.
The UK did the same to German cities at a much greater magnitude, causing about 10 times the number of deaths. But most German civilian deaths came from the ground at the late stage of the war. When the Nazi regime collapsed, civilians living in occupied regions had to desperately flee from the advancing Soviet army. Rapes were widespread, and death estimates ranged from 600,000 to 3 million. Let's step back and see where we are with the totals. We just counted about 20 million civilian deaths in Europe. If you add this to the European military deaths we already covered, it brings us to over 40 million. Then we have the Asian theater. Here we see the vast majority of military deaths in Asia came from China and Japan. On the civilian side, about 6 million deaths from China, Indonesia, Korea, Indochina, and the Philippines can be attributed to Japanese war crimes, which are sometimes compared to the Nazi atrocities due to the sheer scale of the cruelty. China had the second highest death count after the Soviet Union. And like the Soviets, the Chinese government demonstrated a stunning willingness to sacrifice its own people. Chinese nationalists opened the dike at the Yellow River, hoping the flood would halt the Japanese advance. 500,000 Chinese civilians or more were killed, which is 2 or 3 times the number who died in all countries in the 2004 Asian tsunamis. But the invasion of China only cost Japan 200,000 soldiers. Most were killed fighting the US and allies in the Pacific War.
The, even after the war ended, people were still dying from hunger, like from diseases, from the broken system. War on its own is not what we say would lead to happiness. It leads to more disaster. That's just the truth. War aren't over when the peace is signed, and its ghost stays for generations to come.
A significant portion of Japanese civilian deaths were caused by American firebombing and the 2 nuclear attacks. Contrary to official US statements, these airstrikes were directed at civilian populations, not military targets. When you add all the deaths outside of Europe, it brings us to a grand total of 70 million for the war, give or take depending on who's counting and what civilian deaths get included. More people died in World War II than in any other war in history. For comparison, here are 20 or so of the very worst wars and atrocities we have on record. Some of these are more of atrocities than wars, but we've seen how that distinction can get blurry. Some of these spanned across centuries. World War II had the highest body count, and it all happened in just 6 years. The world's population has grown significantly since the earliest atrocities on this list. If you want to compare them in terms of what percentage
World War II happened in just 6 years. World War II happened in just 6 years, and It has the highest body count in the history of war that have ever happened. Like millions of people, let's say millions, like trillions of people died. That's just the truth. The people died, and that was the highest death to be recorded in the all the histories of war. And even today, to conflict, it hasn't really stopped. That's what I'm going to say. And or has it? And we still haven't learned how to really stop it. Let's get right into it.
Of the world died. We can adjust the chart to look like this. This rough approximation tells us there may have been more devastating wars before World War II, proportionally speaking. When we turn to post-war conflicts, it's hard to say anything that isn't controversial. But the data shows something quite extraordinary has been happening. In 1989, John Gaddis coined the phrase the long peace to identify the absence of conflict between the nuclear powers during the Cold War. 25 years later, the Cold War is over, and the term is still being used, although its meaning may have shifted. European countries have not fought each other, except for this 10-day war in 1956 when the Soviet Union invaded Hungary. When we look at European wars before World War II, it looks like this. They tend to be more frequent as you go back, though smaller in scale. And the largest 44 economies of the world have not battled each other since World War II. Rich countries have fought poorer countries, like the US versus Iraq, but rich countries have not fought other rich countries. Such a period of peace between the so-called great powers hasn't been seen since the Roman Empire. To many, peace is too strong of a word. Wars have occurred since World War II, and they can be grouped into these four categories. We don't see colonial wars anymore. We've already noted that interstate wars between rich countries have not occurred at all, and here we see wars involving smaller economies have tapered off. That leaves civil wars of two types, with and without foreign intervention. And this is what these battle deaths look like alongside of World War II. More people died fighting in World War II than in all the wars since. And again, we can't forget about world population, which has almost tripled since World War II. If we scale these numbers to show deaths in proportion to world population, showing the likelihood that a person on Earth dies in battle, the downward trend becomes even more pronounced. Now, this isn't to infer anything about why this trend is occurring. That's a discussion for another day. You can now interact with this chart to explore what conflicts are behind the totals. Now bear in mind, we're just looking at battle deaths here, not civilian deaths, but those too are in decline. Peace is a difficult thing to measure. It's a bit like counting the people who didn't die in wars that never happened.
Okay, the World War II, World War population tripled after the World War II, or am I getting it all wrong? But this part actually hits me like peace aren't a norm in human history.
We give such importance to the word peace, but we don't tend to notice it when it occurs or report on it. Sometimes it takes reminding ourselves of how terrible war once was to see the peace that has been growing around us. Of course, this trend may not continue, and it's not clear how looking at these charts can help us make the right decisions to ensure that it does. But the longer the long peace grows, the more significant it becomes. So if watching the news doesn't make us feel hopeful about where things are heading, watching the numbers might.
This is one of the most moving things that I have ever watched. And this is not just history, this is a warning. And war doesn't just kill, it changes humanity, it eliminates the world, it leads to inflation, it leads to destruction, it leads to a lot of problem in the world at large. It affects the economy because things are destroyed, it are being destroyed, it affects home, it affects people. Though I know that some people might feel safe doing the war because of the power they have, so they are always able to hide themselves and their family from being harmed. Guys, this is just my opinion of what I feel. Yeah, if you have believed in peace your whole life, you are luckier than everyone in history. Wow, guys, that's mind blowing. That's literally mind blowing. And I don't understand why people take peace for granted. Or should I say, I don't understand why the government take peace for granted. It's not like I'm trying to wrap around it and figure out the reason why they don't like peace, or should I say human beings don't like peace. I'm trying to wrap around it, the reason why. If this moved you, please comment where you are watching from, what was your country affected by this war, and you can also state if your country was affected by this war. Let's remember the fallen people, let's remember the fallen heroes and learn from them. Don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, and we also got more powerful reactions coming, so you definitely don't want to miss out the things to the world you should never forget. Anyways, guys, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate. See you next.